Hey everyone, my name is Derek von Krog, and today we take a closer look at this dangerous creature that just escaped the UJAM development labs. Virtual Drummer Brute. What we have here is a virtual drummer that is unsurprisingly aimed at loud music, but with a few twists. For one, the recordings were again overseen by drum recording overlord Bernhard Hahn, who already made this plugin sound super awesome, but also had a couple of nice microphone tricks up his sleeve for loud genres. Another twist is that these sounds were all designed in context with music. It's one thing to create a drum kit that sounds impressive on its own, but arguably the more important virtue should be that it retains its body and substance in a crowded mix. So everything you hear in this plugin was sculpted in the context of music. No solo buttons pressed, all to make sure that it can bite its way through a full mix. For your convenience, my good friend Gabriele has prepared a couple of blatantly obvious, borderline offensive sound-alikes to give you an idea about the different kits and aesthetics. So it's great for straightforward, punkish high tempos. Juicy half times. Millennial style crossover. Dirty underground. Enhancement of hip-hop drums. Apocalyptic grunge ballads.
In my eyes, indisposed.
Smooth Aussie vintage sounds.
Got the crimes running round in my head.
Or even aggressive British electronics.
I got the soybeans.
I got the broccoli.
I got the carrots, the radish, the broccoli.
So let's take a closer look under the hood. Brute follows the same logic as previous virtual drummers. Let's start from the beginning. The kits you get are designed to cover a wide area of different aesthetics. Here's a no-nonsense punk kit with short drums, featuring an equally short set of what I like to call potato toms. But due to its short attacks, this kind of kit is also super nice to combine with electronic drums.
Yes, you're always gonna get it. Yes, you're always gonna get it. Yes, you're always gonna get it.
Or this sorry not sorry 90s kit. Let me also pause here and gloat for a second about the depth of sampling. Not only are all these sounds 7-channel samples with super smart rocket science time window based round-robin scripting, depending on the instrument you also get up to 100 velocity layers. So in this snare fill, you didn't hear a single sample twice. This obviously leads to a very natural behavior, like with this big but vintage-ish kit. Great for straight stuff with a vintage touch, but also a very universal drum sound. Please also note the set of outrageously big floor toms. Great for individual accents. Don't use potatoes with these. On the other end of the spectrum, we have this mini snare and a deep but dry bass drum for your crossover needs. Or this set of underground drums, painstakingly tuned to sound like they were not tuned, but beaten to death after a 2-hour-long concert. Kind of ironic, but sounds super nice. But enough with the sounds, let's talk about mixing. Rock music engineering is very much about sculpting one's drums to a particular taste. So for many of you rock music production nerds out there, the obvious way to use this plugin would be to use the individual outputs, so that you have individual access to the multi-channel samples and can mix the direct microphones, overhead microphones, room microphones and vibe microphones to your individual liking, with your personal favorite plugins and in your preferred way. But before you do this, hear me out on the other option. Not sure if I ever mentioned this before, but UJAM likes stuff to be simple and effective. Therefore, super prominent mixing wizards like this guy ran these sounds through offensively expensive racks of outboard gear, which are then modeled into a one-knob mix mode, finisher style. This essentially mimics an engineer with a lot of hands that can turn dozens of knobs at the same time to look for a sweet spot. Let's take the slam mode as an example. At first, it will start with a little direct channel compression. It will then add parallel compression. It will then add compression on the room microphones. And finally, it will add completely inappropriate amounts. But maybe that's what you want. So we made sure to not exclude irresponsible settings. Sometimes it's fun to be irresponsible. Or try this mode that sits somewhere between rock and hip-hop with a lot of punch. Or try this mode, which smoothly morphs from parallel saturation to full-on saturation on the direct and master channel. Of course, you also have individual controls for drum sounds. Adjust levels here. If your genre is more on the electronic side, shorten the sounds here. Treat overhead and room microphones to some individual compression here. The aux effects are tailored to each mix mode, but you also get additional choices like a wide drum booth, reamping through a PA, a dirty room with a tempo sync pre-delay, or try out the popular mix move to run your drums through a parallel tube screamer. Nice. But on to my favorite feature. So let me talk about this crazy person again. As was already the case in Virtual Drummer Deep, Virtual Drummer Brute allows you to crossfade between different microphone philosophies. So these two controls don't do effects or DSP in the traditional sense, but allow you to balance different microphone setups that follow different approaches, tailored after the encyclopedic knowledge of recording history that this guy has memorized over the last decades, for some reason. Want your drum microphone setup to be more direct and in your face? Turn the grid knob to the left. Want your drum microphone setup to be more organic and vintage? Turn the grid knob to the right. Want to have your cake and eat it too and get a decent mix of the two? Leave it in the middle. And the smack fader? Well, that's a longer story, so please allow me to go off on a hopefully not too long tangent about the recent history of sound engineering. During the 90s, the level of drums in a typical mix was a bit higher than it is today. Many of today's rock productions have a bigger wall of guitars. Now, louder guitars technically means the same as less loud drums, so mixing engineers were looking for ways to still make the drums sufficiently cut through a mix. This trend eventually oscillated around the so-called enveloper. In simplified terms, among other things, an enveloper can detect the attack of a signal and make it louder. Sounds like a perfect solution for the scenario I just described, but there is a problem. Envelopers belong to the family of these seductive tools that are easily overdone, and when overdone can lead to drums that are slightly clicky and lack a bit of substance and body. So that's not something that we want, and this is where the smack fader comes in. The smack fader is not an enveloper effect, but will add microphones that were chosen, positioned and processed in the analog realm for maximum transient response and attack. So in a way, what you get here is a more organic sounding alternative to using envelopers. An alternative that, by the way, also works on the individual outs, where the mix engine is bypassed, but the microphone aesthetic crossfaders still change the character of your individual outs. So, say you have your mix finished, but you feel like your drums are slightly drowning in guitars, just like the guitarist likes it, but maybe not the drummer. Whether using the mix modes or individual outs, and as subtle as it is at times, the smack fader is your best friend in that scenario. Or just dial it up whenever you feel like it because you wanted some smack to begin with. Finally, let's talk a bit about programming drums. Obviously, you can just use the one-shots and program your stuff like with any other plugin. But in case you don't know much about drum programming, or you are in a hurry, or both, try out this classic UJAM style section. Obviously, for a rock-centric virtual drummer like Brute, these styles are not exactly civilized. UJAM-ish crescendo from left to right. Patterns with increasing intensity and variations like intros, verses, fills, choruses, breakdowns, specials, and endings. They come with human timing, but there's also a fader to dial them all the way from slightly drunk to computer quantized. To give you an idea, almost everything you heard in this video was based on these styles. I just dragged and dropped whatever I needed into my arrangement and beat only to have quick access to a nicely non-static hi-hat, to then add whatever pattern I needed in that moment. I'd like to think that it's details like these that make the style archive useful even for production nerds who would otherwise never use such a function. So that was Virtual Drummer Brute. As always, UJAM invites you to try out the fully functional demo that runs without any restrictions for a month. And to give this video an appropriately absurd outro, please enjoy this silly style called Bathroom Break. The fade out starts now, so go!
Oh yeah! Alright! Oh, you're gonna be my bee tonight. Alright! Oh, you're gonna be my bee. Oh yeah! Alright! Oh, you're gonna be my bee. Oh yeah! Alright! Oh, you're gonna be my bee tonight.
My kind of woman.